Let's bring in political commentator Chris Cillizza, host of So What with Chris Cillizza on YouTube. Chris, tariffs right now are certain on day one, are they? Or is President-elect Trump looking to gain leverage on securing the border?
Yeah, Nick, I never say anything is certain with Donald Trump until he actually does it. If you remember back to after he was elected in 2016, he talked about similar things. He didn't put specific numbers on tariffs in terms of percentages in what countries, but he said, look, we're going to add tariffs. He didn't wind up doing it initially. So I would say with Trump, everything's a negotiation. I don't think it means he's not going to do this. I think it's certainly possible because, as you noted, he talked about it all the time on the campaign trail. But I would not assume that these numbers are, and on day one, it's going to happen. I think at least right now, it's probably a negotiation tactic, which also doesn't mean he won't do it.
Chris, there are questions, though, over what authority the president-elect would use to get these tariffs actually put into place. Is this setting up for a major legal fight, and how do you see members of Congress actually reacting to it?
So I think this is part of a broader strategy, Nick, that we're going to see with Donald Trump. I mean, he believes the executive, the White House, has broad and sweeping powers across almost everything. So I think, from what I am no trade expert, but what I have read suggests this is something he will be able to or can do without congressional approval. And candidly, I don't think that a Republican-led Senate and a Republican-led House will involve themselves in this to try to fight him on it. Because again, whether you agree or disagree with the economic theory behind putting tariffs in place with our major trading partners, and there's a huge amount of debate over whether that is a good thing or a bad thing. Politically speaking, Donald Trump said he was going to do this repeatedly on the campaign trail. So you cannot, if you're a Republican member of Congress, it is not as though people are going to be surprised by this. And I don't think you'll see a big rebellion there. There will be other things that Donald Trump tries to do in terms of going around Congress or cutting Congress out that I think there'll be bigger fights about. I don't think this is one.
Chris, President-elect Trump wrote these tariffs will be, quote, among many executive orders coming. What does that signal to you about his priorities in his first 100 days, though?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think we know he views the presidency as his understanding or care for separation of powers is not strong. The presidency has gotten more and more powerful, Democrat or Republican, over the last decade and a half or 2 decades. And I think if he is allowed to do what he wants, which he may well be with a Republican Congress, he will further consolidate power within the executive branch. I don't think there's any question about that. Look, we're going to see on immigration and deportation of people who are here illegally. I think he's going to try to do a bunch of things on that by executive order. Not sure he can do everything, but I think he's certainly going to try. And on trade, again, you know, Nick, I always say with Trump, it's like I think the possibility that he follows through is real on these threats. But also, if you look back at his time on the campaign and his time in the White House, there have been many times where he said he was definitely going to do something and he has not done it. So I would not take this to the bank that on January 20th at 12:01 p.m. 2025, this happens. But I also wouldn't be stunned if it did.
And you and I both know that other world leaders are definitely keeping an eye on things as well, because they have to be feeling similarly. Chris Cillizza, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. Also, don't forget to click that red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.